Hey there folks, so in this video what we're going to do is start setting up some inputs to make our character move. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into my content browser and in my core folder I'm just going to make a new folder in here called inputs. And there are two types of things that we're going to need in here. The first one is if I right click, we're going to be looking under the input section for input actions. And we're going to take all of those input actions that we create and put them into an input mapping context. Now to keep this nice and simple for now, I'm just going to go with the first one, which is going to be our move left and right on our side scroller character. Once we've got that one done, I'll go back and I'll add a couple of extra ones as we go through different tutorials, different examples. So for example, we might add jumps, actions, attacks and things like that. But for now, let's just get it so our character can move left and right and see how that works. So the first one I'm going to add is this input action, and I'm going to go with IA underscore input action, and I'm going to go with this one being move right. And I'm going to keep this one nice and simple. Maybe I'll put in SS for the side scroller, but in the future we can do a 2D version which will be up, down, left and right. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to look through all these different options, and the one that I really want to focus on here is this value type. You can see there's basically 4 different options that we come here, and when we press this button, what is it going to give us? It's either going to give us a true or false, is the button pressed, yes or no, a 1D float, so that's going to be potentially a value between -1 and 1 when we're thinking about a kind of analog stick, or it could be, you know, just a value that's increasing and decreasing. And we've also got a 2D, which is 2 of these floats combined together into a vector 2D, and that's what's really useful for our kind of upwards and left and right movement, so our X, Y. And then the final one, the vector one, we're probably not going to need our 3D game because we don't really need 3 dimensions to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the axis 1D because I want to have a positive and a negative value to this. Now I can add triggers and modifiers. We will come back and add those in later, but for now I'm going to add them in the mapping context. But just know that you can add modifiers and triggers in here, and if you do, then they'll show up in the mapping context, and then we can choose to either use the ones that are defined here or override them later. Now for now, that's all I'm going to need. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that input section and create the input mapping context. This one I'm going to call IMC for input mapping context. And we'll go with it being our SS movement. Keep it just the movement stuff for now. In the future, I can add in extra things in there, but this will just do fine just for the side scroller movement. Now I open this up, and with this open, you'll see that there's a mappings array, a section here that has nothing in there. So if I add a new entry in there, I'm adding an action mapping, and it's going to say, you're adding an action mapping, which input action would you like to assign to that? So we've only got one in our project right now, so we'll assign that one. And if I open that out, you'll see that it has one key added as a default. Now I want this to run on A and D on my keyboard for now. So what I could do is I could go onto this little this drop down box, and I could type in the A key, which is not really finding me anything. I could go into the keyboard section and scroll through and find it in here, and you see that there is an A key. Or this little button here of the keyboard icon is actually really useful because this is a listener key. So if I click on this, now it's listening for me to make an input, and if I press a key on my keyboard, so for example press the A key, you can see it auto assigns from that list what this needs to be. Now here I've got this little circle icon with a plus in it, and this allows me to add another control binding, so another button, an input, can be assigned to this input action. And as we've said, we want this to be for our move right as well as our move left. So let's add in the move right element. So we've got A for left and D for right. Now how's this actually going to work? If we were to go and use this right now, what's going to happen is it's going to run basically on down. So as long as the key's pressed down, it's going to keep on triggering. But both of these are going to be triggering the exact same number. So what I need to do here is I need to go into the modifier section of the one that I'm using for left, which is our A key. And I want to just add a new modifier in here and turn it to a negate. And what that's going to do is it's going to say, okay, well, you're feeding me a value. This key is feeding me a value when it's down. It's giving me a 1. Rather than a 0 when it's not being pressed down. But what we can do here is we can say, well, let's negate that. Let's turn it from a 1 into a -1. And when we use that for our directional value, -1 is going to be used to move us to the left. +1 is going to be moved to the right. Okay, so that's enough that we need here for setting this up and getting started. The next thing I need to do is I need to go back to my ZD character base, the side scroller one that I have here. and I need to go into the event graph, and now you can see that I can right click and I can actually create an event based on that input action. So you can see here IA underscore move right. So IA underscore move right. Now I'm adding in the event version. The one below it, the value will just give me the value that it's outputting, so ones and minus ones and so on. But you can see here now this is telling me that I can press this button, and when that button is pressed, I can trigger, start, ongoing, cancel, completed. I have different options for running this. So let's just test this out, and I'm going to show you why this isn't going to work just on its own. And you can see movement. Let's just print string and output that word onto the screen. So we would expect that if I press and I press A or D, I would see movement being printed out. But creating the input action, putting it in the mapping context is not enough on its own. What we've got to do is we've got to tell this character, tell this controller that this is the mapping context that we would like to use. Because what can happen is as you're playing a game, let's say we're playing something like The Witcher, we might be moving around and we need the locomotion, but then if we were to get onto a horse, the mapping context, if you think about all these options here, well, we're no longer moving right. We might be galloping, we might be jumping and vaulting off of the horse. If we fall into the water, we might be diving and swimming. So the mapping context is something that actually is going to keep on changing. So we need to go and define this inside of our controller. Now I say inside of the controller, lots of tutorials will show you how to add it inside of our character base, yeah, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do it inside of the controller because the functionality exists in the controller, so it makes sense to do it in there. So in the controller, I'm going to find my begin play, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the enhanced input, if I can type it there, local player subsystem, and you can see the first one that comes up has an output on the right hand side, but it doesn't have one on the left. That's fine, that's the one we're looking for. If I was to just search through, because you can see there's two options that come out, the other one is looking for an input, it's looking for a player controller, and this is the one that you use if you're doing this from somewhere else, where you can tell it which player controller you want to be using. But as we're in the player controller, we don't need to do that because we're already here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come off of this and first of all just do a quick check just to make sure if this is valid. And if it is valid, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mapping context. So I've dragged off of the enhanced input local player subsystem and I've typed in to add a mapping context. So what this is doing is it's adding a mapping context of my choice into this enhanced input local player subsystem. So if this is valid, let's add this in. And which one would you like to use? Well, we've only got one. It's our IMC SS. And what this is basically saying is that when our character is, well, when our player is using this controller, when it starts, when the game commences, this mapping context is going to be assigned and used. And that means that any keys that are assigned and used in there, so the move right action, they will be activated. They will start working, which means if I press the A key or the D key, that event that runs move right should be triggering. That's important because we might choose to remove a mapping context. So for example, go back to our example of walking and then jumping into water. We might need to remove the mapping context for walking and ground locomotion, and we might need to add a new mapping context on for water and swimming. In which case we might still be using the same keys. Maybe A and D are still used in that new one, but they do a different thing. So let's go back to our character. Move right should print out this. And if I press now, you can see pressing it to the right, so that's D, pressing it to the left. Okay, so let's just check what this means if we look inside of our character. I'm going to take this action value here and I'm going to plug that into the print string. And what you'll see is it gives me a conversion node. So it takes my float, converts it into a string, into the symbols for me. And now A, -1, and D, +1. Okay, so that's going to be enough for now just to get us started. And what we're going to do next is we're going to start using this to actually create some movement on our character and making them move left and right. Okay, so I've just taken a moment just to make a couple of changes to the level ready for this. And what I've done is I've just taken the kind of the mapping out and the prototyping kind of demo scene that I've created. And you can see if you look in the bottom left, I've rotated this. So actually now it's facing down the x-axis. So you can see that the forward is on the x-axis of the world is this way, and that means if I'm looking at my game like this, that indicates that this horizontal direction is X and the upwards direction is going to be Z. Now the reason why I've done that is because now we want to put that movement on in here. Instead of just printing out the number, I want to use that number to make our character move. Now, we don't need to do a lot of complex stuff if we're just making a side scroller here. We're going to go with our add movement input, and it asks us what direction do we want to move in. With a third person character, we might need to do things like finding which way our character's facing, which way is forward direction for them, and actually the control rotation. But for now, because we're doing a 2D character, I'm just going to be making the move left and right. Well, we've just said left and right exists on the x-axis, so we want to move it on the x-axis here, so we'll make that 1 to say that that is the axis being used. And how quickly do we want to move? Well, the action value is going to be multiplied onto that, and that's just going to be a 1 or -1, and that's just going to mean that what we'll do for now is we'll use the speed defined in our character movement for how quick we go, and we'll just set up this as our direction. So how does that work? Well, if I look at my character now and I press D, he moves to the right, and if I press A, he moves to the left. So that's pretty good. He can move right, he can move left, and obviously I've turned off the collisions on that camera. You can see now as we start moving around what perspective actually means. You can see that I can see things moving very quickly in the front view, things off in the back view, and I can see the sides of elements as well, depending on how far away from the camera they are. So that's going to create our movement, and just for now, that's going to be enough to get our character moving forward, left and right. What we'll come back to next is we'll start looking at how we can actually get it so our character turns around to face the direction of movement. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to access more of my Unreal Engine content.